Look, let's keep it 100 right out the gate. Most of us grew up being fed this Disney-fied, sanitized version of history. You know the one. Noble chiefs, tribes singing Kumbaya in total harmony with nature, everyone just chilling until the greedy white man showed up and wrecked the party with nothing but death and destruction. It's a clean story. It's a comfortable story. It actually makes us feel enlightened just for feeling bad about it. But if you actually take a second to look under the hood, that good guys versus bad guys narrative falls apart real fast. Before Columbus even had the idea to sail the ocean blue, North America was already a straight-up war zone. We're talking about brutal, non-stop tribal beef that's been swept under the rug for decades because it doesn't fit the modern victim narrative. Today, we're pulling that rug back. We're going deep into the side of history that doesn't make the grade school cut. And trust me, it's a lot bloodier than your history teacher told you. People always think the violence in America started when gunpowder hit the scene. Man, they couldn't be more wrong. Violence was the primary currency of the plains long before the first horse ever stepped foot on this soil. If you were a young dude in a tribe back then, you didn't get clout or street cred by being a good farmer or a nice neighbor. You got it by being a stone-cold killer. Taking a scalp wasn't just a win in a fight, it was your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and your social standing all rolled into one. It was how you got a wife, how you earned the respect of the elders, and how you proved to the entire village that you weren't a liability when things went south. We like to think of scalping as something Europeans taught the natives, but the archaeology tells a totally different story. At a place called Crow Creek in South Dakota, researchers dug up 500 bodies from the year 1300. That's nearly 150 years before Columbus was even born. Almost every single one of those bodies was mutilated, scalped, and showed signs of a massive pre-colonial massacre. No Europeans in sight. Just raw tribal warfare at its most extreme. And the torture, that's where things get really rated R. We're talking about public rituals that would make a modern horror movie look like a cartoon. It wasn't just about killing the enemy, it was about breaking them, burning people alive, taking fingers one by one, making captives run a gauntlet where the entire village lined up to beat them. This wasn't some random act of anger. To them, it was Tuesday. It was a cultural tradition meant to test your moxie. If you could face that kind of pain without screaming, you earned honor even in death. This was the world the settlers walked into. It wasn't a peaceful vacuum. It was a continent of warring nations that had been fighting over land, resources, and revenge for 1,000 years. When the European settlers finally rolled up, it wasn't a civilization meeting savages like the old books say, but it also wasn't evil invaders meeting saint like the new books say. It was two totally different brands of brutality clashing in a vacuum. The Europeans brought their old world rules. They wanted uniforms, they wanted to march in straight lines, and they wanted to declare war like it was some formal invitation to tea. The tribes, they played a completely different game. They used hit-and-run tactics that would make modern special forces look like amateurs. They'd hit a homestead at 4 a.m., burn the whole place to the ground, take no prisoners, and vanish back into the timber before the sun was even up. The settlers called it terrorism because they didn't have a word for it back then. The tribes just called it war. Eventually, the settlers realized that their gentlemanly rules were just a fast track to a graveyard. So they adapted. They ditched the uniforms and the formal lines and started playing just as dirty. Groups like the Texas Rangers were born out of this chaos. These weren't polished soldiers, they were trackers and gunmen who learned to fight exactly like the people they were hunting. They started targeting villages, burning winter food supplies, and taking scalps of their own. It became this no-holds-barred cycle of eye for an eye revenge that stretched on for 300 years. Nobody was the good guy by the time the smoke cleared. It was just a question of who was going to be left standing. If you really want to talk about the baddest dudes on the block, you have to talk about the Comanche. These guys weren't just a tribe, they were a legit empire. They took the horse, this piece of tech the Spanish brought over, and they weaponized it better than anyone in the history of the world. Think about this. A Comanche warrior could hang off the side of a horse at a full gallop, using the animal's body as a meat shield while sniping you with 20 arrows a minute from under the horse's neck. That is some straight-up John Wick level stuff. They owned a territory the size of Texas, and they didn't ask for anyone's permission. They took tribute from the Spanish. They made the Mexican frontier practically collapse. And for 150 years, everyone, I mean everyone, was absolutely terrified of them. They were the lords of the plain, and they didn't play by anyone's rules but their own. But here is the real kicker that most people miss. For all the arrows, the muskets, and the legendary battles, the real MVP of the conquest wasn't a soldier or a general. It was a germ. Native Americans had been isolated for so long that they had zero immunity to old world bugs like smallpox, measles, and the flu. We are talking about a biological apocalypse on a scale we can't even imagine today. Estimates suggest that 60 to 90% of the entire native population was wiped out by disease alone. In many cases, the settlers didn't even have to fire a shot. The viruses did the heavy lifting before the wagons even crossed the Mississippi. It wasn't a grand, mustache-twirling conspiracy for most of it. It was just the brutal reality of biological fate. So what is the actual takeaway here? History isn't a fairy tale with a moral at the end. Native Americans weren't cardboard heroes or eternal victims. They were tough, resilient, incredibly skilled, and, frequently brutal warriors. They were human beings living in a world that didn't give out participation trophies. When we sanitize their history to make it kinder or more PC, we actually end up disrespecting the people who lived it. We strip away their agency and their power. The frontier was messy, it was loud, it was bloody, and it was complicated. The more you dig into the real journals and the real archaeology, the more you realize that the noble savage and the evil invader are both myths. The truth is much darker, much dirtier, and honestly, way more interesting. In this story, nobody walked away with clean hands.